You're unmuted and live.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. We'll call to order this meeting of the Town Council and ask that you begin with us with a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item of business this evening is a public hearing. That public hearing's purpose is to consider the amendment of the Little Compton Town Code, specifically by adding language in Chapter 18, which is entitled Plat Plans. That chapter would include, if this ordinance ends up being adopted, a new Chapter 18-7 concerning attainable housing. We're here to take public comment and consider taking action on that proposal. As we do that, let me reemphasize to you the fact that in this particular change that's being made, it's deliberately being made to a chapter that is not the zoning chapter. That has a very explicit purpose in it. Attainable housing is a new category of affordable housing, and it's a new form of home ownership. It is not a change, deliberate change, for example, to 2-acre zoning. It's not done with that purpose, and that's not its intention. But we are interested in your opinions. I will ask that the planning board make its presentation first so as to set the stage for that, and then we would be happy to have that happen. Given the number of people that we have here this evening, I would ask that you would come forward to the microphone if you have something to say, and that when you do, you identify yourself by name and street. And then, to the greatest extent possible, I would be grateful if you would limit your comments to 2 minutes in order to give everybody a chance. If you wish to return to the microphone later because something has not been said that you think is important, we can certainly entertain that. But I would like to serve as many people here as possible that may have something to say. I'll ask then Mike Steers to come forward with a statement of what's before us.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'll review the proposed amendment to the code. Starting out with its purpose. Purpose of this section is to promote the creation of suitable, sustainable housing units in the residential zone by allowing additional residential density in a manner that balances the need for such housing with concerns for the environment, carrying capacity of land, and the health, safety, and welfare of current and future residents to be defined as attainable housing. While many local workers, such as teachers, trade workers, service workers, and farmers may qualify for affordable housing, we recognize that there may be some who may not. The attainable category expands beyond the current income qualifications for state and federal affordable housing programs to reach members of our community who do not qualify for affordable housing, but who still are unable to access local housing. So the definitions: attainable housing, residential housing built or set aside for year-round owner-occupied habitation for sale that is affordable to households whose adjusted gross income is less than 140% with no lower limit of the area median income, adjusted for family size based on applicable United States Department of Housing and Urban Development schedules, and deed restricted as to remain permanently affordable to the extent permitted by applicable law, but in no event less than 99 years, including a suitable mechanism for monitoring the long-term affordability of the units. Deed restriction shall be renewed for an additional 99 years upon each conveyance of the property. Affordability. For the deed restrictions must be approved by the planning board. And they'll be approved as part of the subdivision. Affordability, for the sole purpose of determining attainable housing, 35% of the purchaser's income is used only to calculate the maximum price for a house, including real property taxes and insurance. The approval procedure, special use permit. A special use permit to allow up to 4 units of attainable housing may be granted by the planning board under unified development, subject to the standards set forth below in subsection D and together with one of the following processes. Subdivision. The creation of any new lots for attainable housing shall be reviewed as a subdivision by the planning board simultaneously with the review of the special use permit. Standards for attainable housing. Attainable housing must consist of single-family dwelling units. The proposed development must conform to the characteristics of the surrounding area to the greatest extent possible. The reduction in minimum lot sizes, attainable houses shall be permitted in a residential zone on a lot with a lot area of not less than 30,600 square feet, with road frontage no less than 120 feet, with a lot width of no less than 120 feet, extending back for 100 feet, and with a lot with no less than 75 feet wide for the remainder of the lot. Lot created in accordance with attainable housing ordinance shall not be treated as a substandard lot of record and should not be eligible for further subdivision, the placement of an ADU, or any relief available to substandard lots of record. Other dimensional requirements, a lot designated for attainable housing in accordance with the attainable housing ordinance shall not contain a dwelling larger than 1,800 square feet, nor a dwelling more than 30 feet in height. Front yard setbacks shall be no less than 30 feet, and side and rear yard setbacks shall be no less than 25 feet. Lot coverage shall be no more than 10%. Potable water. Potable water shall be available and shall meet the Rhode Island Department of Health requirements. The planning board shall require a tested flow of no less than 2 gallons per minute for 4 hours. However, this condition shall not be required until final stage approval. DEM approved septic. A septic system approved by the Rhode Island DEM shall be a condition of approval for any attainable housing. This condition shall not be required until the final stage as well. Termination date. This ordinance shall terminate upon a date 5 years after the passage, as otherwise extended by the town council.
Thank you. Then open this forum to comments from the public in this public hearing. If you'd identify yourself by raising your hand. Yes, sir. Behind you, Larry, what was the first hand? Thank you.
Can I just make one comment? I think there's a misconception that we're going to reduce lot sizes from the 2-acre minimum to 30,000 square feet for a house, which isn't the case. It's going to be 30,600 square feet per house for affordable housing. And my understanding is going to be for 4 houses in one area. So it's not going to reduce our 2-acre minimum. If somebody buys a 2-acre lot, they can only build 1 house on that 2-acre lot. This is only for affordable or attainable housing. That's it. Okay, that's what this is for. So I don't think this is going to be a situation where you're going to have these 4 houses popping up all over town. So just to clear that up, the 2-acre minimum size house lot is still going to be in effect and probably be in effect forever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So it looks like, of course, the document talks about this.
Name and address, sir.
Am I? Let me ask that question. My name's Ken Ramsey. I've lived in town, actually voted in town for 30 years. So I'm a full-fledged, full-time member of this town. I don't come and then I leave. Okay? So I have a vested interest in this town, and I love the people of this town, and I've talked to a lot of people in this town. So what you're basically talking about is maybe up to over a 5-year period, 5 developments. Well, the last couple of weeks, even though I've been around for 30 years, I've been driving around a lot. I've been going down Warren's Point, had a very good conversation down there today. I've been going down Chase Point. I've been walking up to Pequahawk. That's just a little hop, skip, and a jump, as they say, from my own home. And it kind of amazes me. I hear that we do not have enough housing in town, and things are getting more and more unattainable for people because of the prices. Well, of course they are. You're building a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot house on 5, 10 acres of land. Yeah, it's getting more and more difficult for people. It isn't because we don't have structures in town. It's not because we don't have a lot of land still in town. The thing is capital has sucked it all up. Money. That's why. So I just throw a couple of controversial statements out here. And anyone who lives in these areas, don't throw rotten tomatoes at me. They're not really ripe yet.
Address the council,
Yes, I would do that. My humble apologies.
It's not a matter of pride, it's a matter of how it's done.
Yep, my humble apologies. So what I would suggest, if you're going to make these developments, you do it in an equitable fashion. Don't put it down the poorer section of town. What you do is you put a development in Chase Point, you put one in Warren's Point, you put one in Pequahawk, put one in Secaucus Point area, and they could even be condos. I saw a beautiful big house in Warren's Point about a half hour ago, make 3 attainable condos. Let's spread it around. I'm sure the teachers, firefighters, and working people in this community and people that want to come into this community would love to see the waves and hear the waves at night. That's what I think you ought to do. And then I think also what you ought to start talking about is for people who do not vote here, who do not live here full time, but like to have a say, do what they do in Florida. If you are not a full-time resident, you get a bigger tax bang, and you lower the rates for the elderly that you're concerned about. Charge those who can afford to have 3, 4, 5 houses, including one here. They can afford it. Let them pay some money because they love the people of this town, from what I understand, from what this book tells me. Let's do it. Let's increase the taxes on those who can pay it, those who can afford other houses in Florida, Manhattan, Boston, anywhere. And I'm sure they'd be happy to do it because they can afford to do it. So I would look at the tax rate, and yes, I would also look at the zoning. One thing I do like in this book, and this should be for everybody, the house lot sizes, the new houses going up, should be 1,800 square feet. Let's not look at a class of people and say, we're going to monitor you. We're going to hire someone, a monitor. They don't want to be looked at and watched. They want a house, they want it fair and square, and they want equal access to get into places. And just as a little funny story tonight.
Sir, if I could, we'll pass 2 minutes and I don't think we need a story.
Okay, well, guess what? I won't give you a story.
Thank you. Please.
You pass those around, so I keep one for yourself. In the interest of trying to stay within my 2 minutes,
Yes.
I will say, first of all, that I am here to, I support the purpose and substance of this proposal. I'm going to focus on, I had a couple other things to say, but I'm just going to focus on the one. I've had concerns. I've expressed concerns before about the monitoring aspects, current language. I know this has been worked on hard by the council, by the Commons Foundation representatives, by the Planning Board, by the Housing Trust. But I do believe language as it stands in one definitions B one that say include a suitable mechanism for monitoring long-term affordability of the units is just not adequate for a more complicated issue. So what I've done, I'm informed, I did not attend your last council meeting when there was a good discussion about this that I watched. Bowen, Mr. Locke, it was a good substantive discussion about this. If I will use my 2 minutes just to read what I have proposed to you as a possible way to approach amending this section to make it more specific, but I hope not that is open enough to provide some flexibility going forward. If I may, I'm just going to read my proposed section B1. I'll skip over the first part. A deed restricted so as to remain permanently affordable permitted by applicable law, but in no event less than 99 years, provided further that restrictions, 1, shall be renewed for an additional 99 years upon each conveyance of the property. 2, will provide for appointment by the Little Compton Town Council of a monitoring agent for attainable housing to monitor the long-term affordability of the units and compliance with the terms of this section, subject to monitoring agent such monitoring agent to be selected in accordance with the duties and qualifications set forth in Article 7, administration and enforcement of regulations of the subdivision regulations of the town of Little Compton. I understand that those the subdivision regulations yet, but based on my understanding of Mr. DeSisto's explanation of why this isn't a zoning thing, that might be an appropriate place to put some specifics. And finally, that the deed restrictions shall also require execution, that the deed restriction terms shall also require execution of a monitoring services agreement, monitoring agent, the applicant for a special use permit required by section C1 here and under, and the town of Little Compton. And finally, the deed restrictions shall be approved by the planning board. So all that is an attempt to clarify, get-go, that more specifically, rather than providing the planning board with just a guideline that says suitable mechanism, I could get into the details on a good explanation of why the challenge of using the affordable income law and standards for what we're trying to do, which is different. There's a little bit of a challenge trying to do this in a doesn't get us into the things we're trying to avoid with regard to affordable income standards. So I just offered this as food for thought, a possible way to tighten up the monitoring provision in a more specific way that can be prevented by adoption of kinds of duties and responsibilities of monitoring agent. I would just say that the monitoring is a long-term job, and the town has a stake in it. We can't just delegate that to someone else. It's because this is for a public purpose that we want to ensure the ongoing affordability. The town can't just wash its hands of the monitoring responsibilities. It will be a party to that by terms of the deed restrictions and other requirements. So I think the town can't just delegate that elsewhere and expect it's going to be taken care of for 99 years.
So in summary, you are suggesting that we incorporate language such as yours in the ordinance that will identify how the monitoring agent will be selected and how that
I'm saying that
responsibility.
specify that that's one of the requirements, but you will then, you would have to immediately go to work fleshing that out in your subdivision regulations.
Understood.
And I understand that may have, I'm just taking some cues from conversations I've had in Mr. DeSisto's description at the last meeting about the fact that this is not a zoning provision and that the language of this shouldn't necessarily be in the zoning ordinance per se. So I'm pushing those requirements because we're trying not to
Connect it.
we can't, we don't, it was described at the last meeting, the system for monitoring agents in the state model calls for certified agents by the state, and they haven't been doing this kind. This is not their turf, the attainable housing. So we're trying to create our own kind of monitoring agent and our own standards, our own duties and responsibilities that may be similar to those that the state uses, but we may not, the parties may not be able to find the certified people to do this, as I understand it. So we're making our own monitoring system that's different than the state required system. That's my take on what's going on. Thank you.
Is there another person? Yes.
I'd just like to ask that people come to the podium, if they speak more loudly. I really couldn't follow the last speaker's argument very well.
Thank you.
Just in deference to him.
Turned up this.
Yes, sir, in the back.
Hello, Don Frost, Amy Harpath. I just had a couple questions if I could. Do we know how many units in total will be built?
I do not. I don't think we can project that at this point since it's a new category of building.
The answer is no.
No.
Going to be,
Do we know, just because I'm not familiar with this, does this get put to a town vote or is the decision made?
That's a good question. The solicitor knows the answer to that. We spoke today about it.
May I answer?
All right.
This is a proposed ordinance.
Yep.
Chapter 18. Whatever the council does tonight would be fine for this,
Okay,
except under section 203 of the town charter, which is the initiative and referendum section of the charter. That allows voters, if they get a sufficient amount of petition signature, put either an ordinance that's been denied or an ordinance that's been enacted to a vote at a general or special election.
okay. And then any person buying a home under this attainable housing rule would need to, if they're financing the home, their financing would need to conform to the parameters here, correct?
I think that's.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then as far as monitoring goes, to the gentleman's question, is that local or state? Or is that not decided?
Local.
Local. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Lindsay Peniel, 469 Long Highway. I have a soft voice, but I will try to make it loud. My husband and I have lived here for 42 years. My concern is in reference to the 30,000 square foot lots. This is what I would like to speak to. If we overtax the capacity of our natural resources by overbuilding, we will suffer dire consequences that may not be reversible. That is, apart from the very wealthy who will have the ability to import potable water to sustain their lavish lifestyle in Little Compton. In past years, the councilors who changed the minimum land requirements for building from 1 acre to 2 acres foresaw these concerns many years ago. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak?
Good. Yes, I'm walking up. Oh, that's all right. I'll be right.
Good evening, John Sullivan, Old Main Road. I'm against this proposal or this amendment. I think so many things can go wrong with this. And who's going to monitor this? We want people to get housing, but can they afford it? Even if they afford the mortgage, if something goes wrong in the family, something happens, they default on the mortgage, the bank takes over. Then what happens? There's so many issues that I don't think we all see at this point. I think the question is, we want affordable housing. I think the way to do that is having more rental units in the town. And I think a planned unit development proposal would be the way to go. And perhaps we can build multifamily units somewhere where you have like 3-acre zoning to 5-acre zoning, in which you can build multi-rental units in that complex. I think just changing the requirements, I think there's too many hidden things that we don't see. And I would suggest just tabling it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Honorable Town Council. My name is Amy Mooney, and I'm here tonight as a resident of Friendship Farm Lane and the Vice President of the Commons Foundation. In September of 2018, my husband Ross and I made Little Compton our home. At the time of purchase, we grossed around $200,000 annually and purchased our home for $510,000. Ross and I are both the youngest of 4 children, Ross born in Marietta, Ohio, and raised in East Providence, and I born and raised in Pawtucket. Living at my parents' home throughout undergraduate program and calling apartments in Central Falls and Pawtucket my home during my graduate program. On our first date, nearing the end of my graduate school career, and just minutes after meeting, I asked Ross how much debt he had. At the time, I was riding the high of accomplishing my goal of almost completing graduate school with no debt and wasn't interested in anyone interfering with this accomplishment. Sorry, Ross. He married me, so it worked out. I achieved this goal by living below my means, saying no, and working 3 jobs over the course of 3 years. This meant a mix of first, second, and third shift jobs while navigating an evening graduate school program and a 2-year unpaid internship. Neither Ross nor I come from money, but we come from families that believe in working hard, living modestly, and making sacrifices. While living together in Ross's 2-family home in Manville, I was able to save 84% of my income, designating a nominal amount of money from each paycheck to food, gas, and fun. When the cash in my wallet ran out, so did the food, gas, and fun until the next pay period. The money in my bank account never saw the light of day until the closing on our home on 4 Friendship Farm Lane. The same is to be said for the money that resulted in the sale of Ross's 2-family in Manville. Intense discipline, often misunderstood by our peers, had paid off. We were able to put a comfortable down payment on our home in Little Compton with a minimal debt to income ratio. Our mortgage at the time of purchase was about $2,400 a month. Through COVID, we welcomed 2 children, refinanced as the market shifted, and I started a new job at the community center. Shortly after COVID ended, we welcomed our 3rd child, and Ross started a new career. With a shift in our priorities, our growing family, we were in search of a better work-life balance. I traded a commute to Pawtucket for a commute to the community center, and Ross ended his commute to Boston for his entrepreneurial aspirations. Our goal of a better work-life balance with our 3 boys as our focus has resulted in reduced income for both of us, a decision we consciously made, but a challenge we navigate daily as inflation continues to loom. When we closed on our home on September 4th of 2018, our mortgage payment was about $2,400 a month, and we grossed around $200,000 annually. With taxes and insurance, we spent 20% of our gross income on housing. As of today, to spend 20% of your income on housing in Little Compton after a 10% down payment, you must gross $400,000. I repeat, $400,000. Even if you spend 30% of your income on housing, you must gross $280,000 annually. Working hard, living modestly, and making sacrifices no longer suffice in this equation. As some of you know, it wasn't until I settled into my job at the community center that I truly understood the challenge that Little Compton is facing. Working families can no longer afford to live here, yet working families are necessary for the town to function. Without us, the town dies. We employ the few restaurants that remain, we staff our school, our after-school programs and summer camps, amongst a few other necessities that remain. Childcare is one of the necessities that must be present in order for a working family to live here. In a town that has no public transportation and a high cost of living, recruiting employees is nearly impossible. At the community center, we've had to starkly increase our wages to recruit staff, exacerbating our deficit, but also drawing attention to the issues that are afloat within our town. How do we function without a working class? Who staffs the transfer station? Who flips your burger at the diner so long as it exists? Who watches our children while we commute back from our jobs to Little Compton after the school bell at Wilbur rings? Without Pete to paint your newly purchased home, Beth to teach your balance class, Miss Noel to pick up your children or grandchildren for after-school club, and Matt to repair your leaky plumbing, what do we do? Pete, Beth, Noel, and Matt represent the working class here in town. People who you may know, people who you may love, people whose services you may benefit from, and people who may be in this room. 3 out of 4 of these people are renters or live with family. Their future here is uncertain despite being bright and vibrant members of our community. Little Compton is at a pivotal point. It's time we accept our fate and do our best to shift it in an attempt to survive. I'm here tonight to ask you, the town council, to pass the ordinance so we can begin the work that needs to be done, not just to survive, but to thrive. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Karen Edwards. I live on Quicksand Pond Road and I've been here for 30 years and I actually have ancestors that lived in the town. Just a couple of points. I don't think reducing the lot size even for this type of a thing is advisable. I think you should keep the 2-acre lot size and somehow work something out so you're still able to provide the houses and whatever. Mostly because we do have some water issues in town. Unlike Tiverton, who has had neighborhoods that have shortages of water because of overbuilding. I would like Little Compton to avoid doing that. I also have questions about, not questions, but just a statement about how the town works with housing and people building houses. I think that perhaps the town ought to look at restricting the size of houses that people build. Because that also uses additional resources. I know Tiverton put a building moratorium on some of their housing. I think Little Compton ought to look at that as well. The other thing is the 140%, the Housing Trust does 120% of the income level. So I think there could be some conflict here, as this says, the statement says, gross income is less than 140% with no lower limit. The Housing Trust works with 120% no lower limit. So I think you're going to find a conflict between what the Housing Trust is trying to do and what this attainable housing is trying to do. Okay, and that's it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick Bowen. I live at 225A Long Highway, and I'm here this evening in my capacity as chair of the Little Compton Housing Trust. Now, it should be noted that the Little Compton Housing Trust has a purview between 80% and 120% of area median income. And clearly, this proposal for attainable housing would exceed that, as was just referenced. So effectively, this is it's a third category, if you will, that we're proposing. The Little Compton Housing Trust discussed and debated this proposal at our June 12th meeting. And the Housing Trust made several recommendations as a result. The first was a request that some of the language in the initial proposal be changed, as we felt it was less than favorable toward low and moderate income housing, and these changes were in fact adopted. At the time, our proposal, the attainable proposal, called for families or households spending up to 35% of household income on housing. And whereas the state and federal definition of cost burdened is 30% of household income, we urge the council to stay within that 30% number. Number 3, present standard for well water production for any building is what is referred to as an adequate water supply. Any deviation from this could place an undue burden on those seeking attainable housing. And as a result, we recommended staying with that standard of water. there could be unintended consequences given a certain demand of gallons per minute. If it means that the new house going in has to go 100 feet deeper to get that water supply, or has to frack that water, has to frack that well rather, it might be okay for the one building the house, they'll get that number. But if you're next door, it may have unintended consequences there. So number 4, the Housing Trust has urged this council to include in the deed restriction language which would give the town a right of first refusal for any such property which may be the subject of foreclosure. You would want to ensure that any home built under this attainable housing proposal does not subsequently become a market rate house. So in light of these considerations, and I know that there are others, the Little Compton Housing Trust has endorsed this proposal for attainable housing because we feel that it might give an opportunity for those who may not otherwise be able to live or stay in town an opportunity to do so. And that is not just younger people, but older people as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name's Lucille Wolf and I live at 30 Mullen Hill Road. And I have more of a question than a comment. With regard to the potable water, I don't understand how you can test for the 2 gallons per minute for 4 hours until a person drills a well. So can somebody explain that? I don't get it. And why would somebody go forward with building a house knowing whether or not they are going to get that requirement?
I think the question is clearly stated. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
There's someone here who can answer the question.
Yeah, excuse me.
Okay.
So the concept is that in order for the subdivision, there's a subdivision of 4 lots,
Right.
has to be approved in accordance with all the dimensional regulations and everything else. One of the conditions will be that for a lot to be approved, it has to demonstrate that it has water, and it has to demonstrate that it has septic approval from DEM.
Right. But how do you demonstrate the water?
You have to drill. The person who's doing the development has to drill a well to establish that they have water before they can sell the lot or complete the subdivision. That's the way it's written.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
I was trying to get in my 2 minutes before. The only question, I just had 3 grammatical, typographical language issues I wanted to raise. The first one is in the very first line, which has a 2034 expiration date that conflicts with the termination date at the end. So that looks like a typo. In section C1, this is language that I find somewhat confusing. A special use permit to allow up to 4 units of attainable housing may be granted by the planning board under unified development, subject to the standards set forth below in subsection D, and together with one of the following processes. And then there's a section 2 subdivision. And then we get back to the D standards for attainable housing special use permit cited in this section C1. I'm confused by the term together with one of the following processes.
So section C1 has no following.
Well, it has a section. The only process you can infer from that is that subdivision is a process. So either there are no other processes, there are more that we're not finding, or something.
Comment.
What that means. Then finally, just a formatting thing, the final section termination date begins with what I see as a Roman numeral 3, but I don't find any Roman numeral 1 and 2. So I don't know what that's all about. Thank you.
Looks like it could be corrected by calling it E, for example. Work. Are there any other comments for us? Does the council have any comments?
You want to close the public hearing first?
I want to see if there's any comments.
I have some comments. One of the questions, some are directed at, one is directed at the solicitor and one as the chair of the planning board.
Can you speak louder?
Speak, I don't have a mic.
Well, you do, but you just need to speak louder.
All right, I'll raise my voice, which makes my hearing aids ring, but that's okay. The ADU function, like you can't put an ADU in it. Does that conflict with state law? Be writing a law that says you can't use an ADU and then that will conflict with state law?
No, because this is a special program. And because you have this attainable housing program and it's for affordability, the ADU law would not apply in these circumstances.
Because that would hold up in court if someone tried to pull it off.
You never know. But you know what? I think it's worth it to go forward with the language that you have.
Okay, and then to Mike, you read on section 5 of the dimensional requirements, it goes on about the lot size again, the building can be no longer than 1,800 square feet, front yard setbacks, and then it said lot coverage shall be no more than 10%. Is that opening to changing the size of the lot?
No, I mean, the lot coverage. I mean, I'm with you that 1,800 square feet is not going to consume 10%.
The lot would be 3,600 square feet. But then you're saying 10%, no more than 10%, that would be percent. It's just confusing. I mean, it may be legally it's set up right, but it just is confusing to read. Because all of a sudden you've got a lot coverage of no more than 10%, yet you've already restricted the size of the lot can be and the size of the house can be.
Correct. Pardon this?
This goes to outbuildings. So your lot coverage is not just your house. Your lot coverage is all of the other things that count the lot coverage. That's the restriction.
So if you can build an 1,800 square foot house, then add decks on, you could.
But you're limited to 10%. That was put in and that's for the authors to answer. But I think that 10% restriction was put in. I recall a conversation on that at one of the planning board meetings to make sure that the structure remained kind of affordable. You're restricting it to 10% lot coverage.
I'm not taking a position for or against this ordinance. I'm just trying to make sure there's no confusion in what we're reading. Because if that's the case, then you've got an 1,800 square foot house. That means you can put outbuildings on and decks and all this other stuff on this lot to get up to 3,600.
Correct, yes.
Square feet. Okay. And then back to Mike on the, well, maybe it's to you again, solicitor. How's this going to affect angles? Because if you put a lot that's 120 by 100 and you add a 75-foot chunk on the back that's 248 feet, that gets you your lot size. I remember my years on the planning board, there was a thing about angles and making a subdivision and.
Yes, so the way the current zoning is, you have to have a square of 175 by 175 and you run back. You have to go into the lot at least 175 feet with that frontage, then it can be no less than 100 feet. So in this case, we have a reduced road frontage but it prevents, by having a minimum of 100 feet as the lot runs out for the balance of 30,000 square feet, you don't end up with a hockey puck. You have a minimum width of 100 feet for the balance of the lot.
It's just not going to conflict with zoning regulations on how lots are created.
Well, this will not conform to our regular zoning.
So this is a whole separate.
This is separate, a separate category for an attainable subdivision that's limited to 4 possible lots of 30,600 square feet.
Okay.
So I had the same question where it said 1,800 square foot dwelling and then lot coverage at 10%, which would be
3,000.
3,060 feet. So I mean, if this is attainable, do we want to have somebody build a dwelling? Then he's going to build a garage and then maybe an ADU.
No, well,
So I think that lot coverage shall be no 10% taken out. And what you can have is a dwelling of 1,800 square feet.
okay.
That's what we're going to have.
Well, we're trying to permit space
Right.
for outbuildings. Just, I mean, conceptually, you know, we have 87,000 square feet with a 10% lot coverage right now. And you can't possibly fill up the whole lot. But anyway, it was a provision to have some ceiling on lot coverage.
Perhaps,
Surely we can change it. No,
perhaps a phrase that says any additional lot coverage produced by outbuildings may not result in an overall lot coverage of greater than 10%. Is that what you're trying to?
that's fine.
If I could make a suggestion, if you think that 10% is too much, reduce the percentage. But I don't think it's appropriate not to have a lot coverage provision in here. If you think 10% is too much, put it down to 8% or 7%, whatever you think is appropriate under the circumstances.
So we're looking for houses or could be 230,600 square feet lots for two dwellings.
Correct. It doesn't have to be 4. It can be no more than 4.
Can it be one?
Yes. Well, that's up to I mean, if you have a lot, that's a lot of record, you're all set. You don't need to subdivide.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're trying to subdivide, it can be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4, but it can't, there's a minimum lot size and there's a maximum number of 4 lots per subdivision.
So if you have your subdivision with the 4 houses on it, each one's going to have their individual sewage disposal system. It's not going to be a joint system for the 4 houses.
The way the ordinance is written, standalone. That doesn't mean that there can't be a proposal for a sort of a combined, you know, there are some developments that have, each house has its own tank and then they'll have a leach field for the whole development.
Right.
But I think that generally in those multiple housing, and I'll just use the Block Island examples, they all have their own well. They will have a joint septic system. Everybody has their own septic tank.
Okay, because it doesn't say that. So that was just a question I had. Singular septic systems or big septic system for 2 houses or 4 houses. So.
Then I have, if I may, sir.
Yeah.
I have one more question. Was then consideration given to a buyout? Like the person in attainable housing, I'm just making stuff up, hits the lottery and says, I want to keep my house. I'll pay back what I got as a benefit to buy the house outright.
No, I think that there was an intention not to let that happen, that this exception is approved so that the attainable housing will be available in perpetuity. Whenever there is a new owner or a resale, new buyer has to meet the same criteria of 140% of AMI, whatever that is at that time. But the intention is to keep the housing available for townspeople.
That's correct. There is no clawback provision in this ordinance. Correct.
So one other question I had was, like Pat brought out, suppose somebody buys one of these, gets a mortgage on it, and then he can't pay the mortgage. It goes into foreclosure. I know Pat said the town should have right of first refusal, so.
Yes, and with Patrick's suggestion, when we had that meeting, that you'll note that the deed restriction that you have has been amended to include that the town has a right of first refusal.
So the town's gonna pay off the mortgage and get the.
That's,
Work.
that's in the deed restriction. You know, I had some questions about that, but the way it's written, if the mortgagee is attempting a foreclosure, one of the requirements with the deed restriction is a 60-day notice to the monitoring agent saying that, you know, that the mortgagor has, you know, is in arrears and they're about to foreclose. Then there's an opportunity for the monitoring agent get back to the town and have that mortgage sold, so long as the mortgage amount does not exceed 100% of the value of the property.
So it would go to the next person. Obviously, there may be a waiting list for these attainable housing, so it would go on to the next person on the waiting list to pick up that foreclosed mortgage.
That's the intention.
Okay.
This might be a good time to segue in with this discussion that what we're here to do today is vote up or down on the ordinance. All this discussion is about the deed restriction. My understanding, we still have time in many meetings to have a lot of bites at the apple with this. Is that correct?
Correct. Section B1B of the ordinance, that's the planning board approving the deed restrictions, although the template you have in front of you, but that has to be approved by the planning board.
Right, so there's still time to talk about the monitoring agent, the criteria, the municipality's responsibility.
That's correct.
And so that's not what we're voting on tonight. We're just voting on the template, this is just the ordinance. So all these questions, we'll still have time to discuss and vet out.
If we approve it.
This is a public hearing. If we approve this, it's a done deal, isn't it, Solicitor?
You approve the ordinance, and then you can move along and flesh out these other issues. Like, for instance, tonight, we don't know who the monitoring agent is going to be. That still has to be determined.
Well, there's conflict with that.
Yes.
Send it. Just one question for Mike Steers. This was attached to the deed restriction or Compton attainable housing homeownership restrictive easement provision. Well, I understand why it's attached. Is that come from the planning board? But the following requirements shall be incorporated into the property deed restriction, the purchase seller guidelines to pay attainable housing zone or Compton without. Have you seen it?
Came from the planning board.
I think there's a collection of examples that came from the planning board to you that we've passed along in conjunction with the Commons Foundation and development of examples and whatnot.
So we'll continue to have this discussion now.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely have a discussion. I mean, once we have the developer who wants to do this and has applied for a subdivision, then you'll know the lot, you'll know all these details. There's a baseline of responsibilities that you voted on. I believe it was last meeting where the Commons Foundation offered to administer the responsibility for this, and the council accepted that. So there's a structure set forth to carry this out. The details, as you say, a lot of it's going to come out once we get an application for subdivision.
The document you're referring to says that it will be incorporated into the property deed restrictions.
So if the general town council approves this and the general consensus of the town is they don't like it, they can put it on as a referendum item.
So long as the number of signatures are.
See, I see a lot of people here, but we've only 8 people have stood up. So I'm not sure how this audience is looking at this. If it's a good idea or a bad idea, and I hate to ask for a hand show to ask who's here to support this and who's here against it. We're supposed to represent the general public. And only 8 people have stood up to.
I would suggest that the public has had the opportunity through this public hearing to speak to us
Okay.
and for us to make a decision.
So are we modifying 5C, that saying in this document? Take a vote on it?
Yeah.
Actually, if the vote is to approve I actually think that Mr. Anderson's comments, not only the typographical suggestions, but also his revised language is somewhat more specific and perhaps something you should consider if it is to be adopted.
Excuse me, just one second. I've got somebody who has not spoken. Yes. Please.
Hello, I'm Martina Halsey. I live at High Meadow Road in Little Compton. I've lived here 9 years. I think this is a really great idea, but there's too many it's just Ethernet. It's not, it's like are they gonna have their own septic? Is it gonna be this kind of septic? Is it gonna be 4 buildings, 2 buildings? Is it gonna be condos? Our town is dying. And I think we need this, but I think rather than approve this and go forward, I think we need to have a sustainable, this is how it's gonna be. That's gonna be 4 houses here, 6 houses here. There's too many questions. And I don't want the town to be sorry for something that we all need and want. Just think we need a little more research, a little more time to figure out how we're gonna do this, like the septic, the water. I mean, that's it. That's all. I just think we need more information and we definitely need it. So thank you.
So Mike, if somebody comes forward, a developer comes forward, he's going to have to produce what kind of septic systems and the water situation and all those other things. So
He's gonna, it'd be like any other subdivision. He's gonna have to present to DEM, size of the house, they'll do the perk tests, whatever the conditions of the land are, apply for a septic system and get approval.
okay, so just for my edification, the Friendship Farm subdivision, are all those houses on 2 acres?
Well, they're more than 2 acres actually, but yeah.
Mike, I've got a question. I know we've kind of hashed it out a little bit already, but what was the thought of requiring the minimum flow 2 gallons per minute for 4 hours? Are there requirements on other developments in town?
I'm sorry?
Are there minimum requirements like that on other
towns? Yes, it's a matter of.
Not in Little Compton.
No, there's no requirement in Little Compton.
And so what was the thought about?
The thought was that we would be the town's taking responsibility for developing these houses. And then if you don't have water, who's responsible? And so we had this discussion where the ADU law said there had to be adequate water. We said, what is adequate water? And we reviewed other states. As a matter of fact, DEM had some rather strict requirements that they published, and for whatever reasons, weren't transferred to the Department of Health, but they vary relative to the depth of the well. So if you have a deep well, then you have a reservoir. It got very complicated. But if you go to Massachusetts, you got to have 5 gallons, and you got to demonstrate that you have 5 gallons. So we looked at the Conservation Commission's data and the bell curve of Little Compton from 0 to a lot of water. And we wanted to make sure, or felt we should make sure that anybody that was investing in a house had minimum water. And it was the responsibility of the developer to make sure that as part of the development.
Me again, Ken Ramsey. I agree with Martina. This is townsfolk here. I don't know if everybody in this room votes in town, but I don't think so. I would suggest that if you folks say this is a go, that you have a town meeting and let the people who pay taxes in this town, who vote in this town, have their say. I respect all the people in here, but this is certainly a small percentage of the people who are going to be affected by this. And this is a very, very major change. It could end up being an environmental nightmare. And I will tell you, and you know this, there's a housing crisis in this country. This isn't just a little Compton problem. It's in Fall River, it's in New Bedford, it's in Tiverton. It's here. It's a problem of money. It's a problem of banking. It's a problem of greed. And we're just dealing with one of the ramifications of that greed. I personally don't see this as solving anything. If I were making $200,000 a year, I'd be happy. I'm not making that much. I could be living well in Fall River. I could be living well elsewhere. And I'm not suggesting that people leave and not want to come here, but people work hard for a living, and it's not a bad income, quite frankly. So that's all I have to say. This isn't just a little Compton problem.
Thank you. Yes.
Most people are here.
Hi, Hal, One Little Pond Cove Road in Little Compton, of course. And I'll try to not belabor the points that some have been made already, but a couple of things I think are really important. The 10% coverage piece, Paul, it's important to recognize that a lot of the people that I've interviewed about whether they'd like to have housing that they could actually afford to live in, they have aspirations for agriculture in the way of maybe having a grist mill or a greenhouse. That's going to increase lot coverage. I'd hate to see that 10% number change and restrict their ability to do some of the things that they'd really like to do in this town.
My only comment about the 10% was I was afraid it was conflicting with 1,800 square feet, not the lot coverage itself.
Right. That's good news.
And by the way, greenhouses don't count.
Okay, thanks. The second thing is I just would encourage people here to think in terms of perfection being the enemy of the good. This is a very good ordinance. It has been worked on for hours and hours and hours by a lot of smart people in this town, people with passion to try to get things done. We're never going to attain perfection. Again, everybody that I interviewed in going around the town, they're mostly young people, young families. Everybody's got a different circumstance, and economics get in the way of their being able to attain what they want, which is housing. So this sunsets in 5 years, and if it needs to be fixed, I'm sure the town council can fix it and tweak those things that aren't functioning well. So I'd encourage you to vote for it.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Andy Ryan, 40 Paget Brook Road. I also would like to encourage you not to look at perfection because you're not going to find it. But I would encourage you to think about this. It is not easy to get a subdivision to prove water and then to build houses today that are at 140% affordable. That is not easy. They're going to you're going to have to almost manufacture that ability for people are going to have to subsidize things. So you're not going to have tons of houses popping up all of a sudden. It just can't happen the way it costs so much money to build right now. It's not feasible to pop up houses and communities all of a sudden, neighborhoods popping up over. It's not. It's going to happen sort of slow. We might get 10 in a year if we're lucky. If we're very lucky, we might get 10 houses that people can afford this year or so. Maybe a little bit more, but this is not going to happen fast, right? And you have plenty of time to make tweaks if you need to. I would just encourage you not to spend years trying to deal with this. And we're going to look back and wish we'd have done something sooner because this problem has been occurring slowly and headed this way for decades. And so I'd really encourage you to do something tonight. And then if you do need to do something, come back and make small changes and just keep an eye on the planning board meeting has to approve these subdivisions. You can all attend those meetings. I'm sure you would love better attended meetings. Been to planning board meetings, but these are not easy things to do, to have a subdivision plan and do that. So I would just encourage you to take the step off the ledge here, give it a try. And then if you're concerned about this, they have to notify abutters. They have to have water, right? Sewage treatment technology is so advanced today. It's so advanced from what it was when houses were built 25 years ago. People don't use as much water in a house as they used to. Just encourage you to give it a try. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Seth Rafael and I live at 288 Long Highway. Can people hear me? My name is Seth Rafael. I live at 288 Long Highway and I have two questions. First of all, I will say I support the proposal and I agree that many, many hours have been put into designing it as it is. I fully support it, but I want to ask two questions to draw out some of the things that Amy was talking about. My first question is a question of fact. What is the number that corresponds to 140% of AMI now?
Go ahead.
For a family of three, it's 140,000. For a family of four, it's 160,000.
Okay. And then
Family of two, it's less. The charge stops at 6.
so, right, and that takes me back to Amy's comment about what would be required now. And frankly, you had a lot of information in there. I just invite you to clarify what you said that added that was that frightening number of $400,000. If you would come up here and just explicate that so it can be better understood. Or tell us from where you see. I just want to make sure people get this because I'm concerned that people, may not fully understand the magnitude of the problem.
I think the point I want to belabor, and this is really personal, is that we bought our house in September of 2018, and more or less for giggles, we listed our house for sale in December of 2022. It was when the market was booming. We had done nothing more than paint, put in some plants and some rocks in the driveway. We bought it for $510. We listed it for $985. It's a builder's grade house with Formica, particle board cabinets throughout and hollow doors. We got an offer on the first day for $980. $510, $980, and we painted and put rocks down. And so I understand there's economics and there's greed, and I get it. I understand that. I understand that. But without having a working class here, we don't have a town. The average cost of a house now is $1 million.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Locke.
Jim Locke, I live on Quicksand Pond Road. I think it's important for everybody here to know what the alternatives are. So there's an attainable housing ordinance that's being considered. And let's think about this example, because this is the correct example. If 3 acres come on the market, that those 3 acres using this ordinance can be divided into 4 different lots. Those houses cannot be sold for more than about $500,000, given the restrictions that are being applied to income and everything else. So a developer using this ordinance can put 4 houses up for $500,000. On the other hand, if a developer from out of town uses the new state laws for the comprehensive permit, those 3 acres can now accommodate 3 affordable houses and 9 market rate houses. Because if you put quarter of your, and there's nothing the town can do to stop that. That is in fact the law of this, so that in fact, those 3 acres can now get 12 houses on them. 3 of them will go for 400,000, but the other 9 will go for $750,000, like the house on John Dyer Road. That's 1,300 square feet. That's on the market now. The difference between 9 houses at market rate and 4 affordable houses is more than $1 million extra in the pocket of it. An outside developer will never use this ordinance to build a house. An outside developer will put 4 affordable houses and 9 market, or 3 affordable and 9 market houses. So that's, and by.
Have a 2-acre minimum.
Oh, no, this, if you have, correct me if I'm wrong, am I right, Patrick?
I believe you are correct.
Am I right,
Yeah.
Michael?
Yes.
So that's the new, that's the alternative to this ordinance.
How many curb cuts would that be?
Pardon?
How many driveways would that be?
Doesn't make, it's not part of,
As it takes, as many poles, as many wires. They're gonna put, how many wells and septic systems up?
they can, the only,
Septic systems on 3 acres.
the only restriction in the state law now is adequate. That's it. So right now, that's the alternative to what we're trying to do.
Be a lot of litigation to that.
There will be a lot of litigation.
Yes. It's your pleasure.
Controversy.
I'm Caroline Wilkie Wardell. I've lived at 42 William Siston Road for 60 years, and I've lived in Little Compton for more than 80 years. I look around here and I see a lot of people that I know have very deep pockets more than I do. I see a lot of people who have a lot more education than I do, but I challenge any of you to love Little Compton more than I do. And I urge the town council to not vote on this tonight. There are too many questions, not enough answers, and I urge you to bring it to the town's people.
I'm sorry.
Go.
Tony, do you want to tell us about how we can have a town meeting? You mentioned it before as a referendum. Can you be specific about that?
There's only 2 ways to enact an ordinance under your charter. First is a town council. And secondly, by referendum, but not the financial town meeting. The suggestion, I think, by the last speaker to put this down for an election, unfortunately, I think we missed the deadline.
Yeah.
So there's 3 guardrails. It has a 5-year sunset. A town council can bring up the ordinance and tweak it, abolish it, amend it, or this referendum. And obviously, attainable housing is not going to save our housing issue here in Little Compton. It's going to take a group to do this. It's going to be the Housing Trust, which is getting on its feet now and doing great work. The Ag Trust, which you'll hear tonight, they need to put farmers on farms, and the attainable housing. It's going to take everybody to get this housing crisis under control. The alternative is, we could put a white flag up over here, and we could put a flag up, just surrender to these people from California and Boston and New York. Or we can try to do something to change this. And I'm excited about it. I'm sure this council is not going to let it go off the rails. There are guardrails. There's a referendum, and there's a 5-year sunset. So I think it's very important that we take this step.
Any other comment? Well, then, yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Melissa McCarthy. I grew up in Chase Point and I own property on Long Highway. I just have a question and a comment. I'm wondering if you have any ideas of the locations of these units, as one of the gentlemen pointed out, Secana Point, Warren's Point, Chase Point. I would love to see affordable housing in Chase Point because I can't afford to live there now. So I'm wondering if you have any locations for these units, or is that still in the air?
It is not specific to siting. It would depend upon the offering of property to be able to do it. There are entities that are busy looking at ways to do it and places to do it, but it is not passed or proposed with any particular area of the town in mind as being, this is where we're going to do it. This gives permission, as others have very eloquently said, gives permission for us to do things that we need to do that our current, the constraints of our current zoning prevents us from doing. And that's not because we didn't pay attention to it, but it's rather because we're being told, here's what can happen on property in your town, whether you decide it or not. And therefore, what we're trying to do is develop something that can solve the problem in the face of the fact that a decision that says, just put a whole bunch of houses on the street next to you and that'll fix it, works in a place that already is got that kind of infrastructure. It won't work here. And so our concern is that it won't happen here either. And that's why I think the appeal from those who have made the case for people who need housing is so persuasive.
I do support affordable housing in Little Compton. I think the locals need it. I do think there have been a lot of questions, concerns, comments, and edits on the proposal for tonight. And I hope that the council will postpone the vote until those comments, questions, and edits have been incorporated into the proposal and shared again with the town. So we have time to review it, read it, and come back to the next meeting to have a public forum again.
Thank you. Yeah.
What's your thought on that last, postponing this until we get the verbiage as was brought up by Larry? Or is it gonna be contingent, approved, contingent upon it?
Take either route.
What would your advice be? Wait till it comes back as
another public hearing?
Well, I don't know if you need another public hearing.
No, I don't. I think we need.
You know, it's just a question of putting in some editorial changes. You could do that at your next meeting.
Come back with what we're gonna vote on.
Yeah, but what I referred to and what the proposed edits were are not substantive. In my opinion, at least. One of them is a clarification. And the other one is to correct some typographical errors and some a formatting issue.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Joe Azrak, Grinnell Road, Little Compton. Been here somewhere between 28 and 40 years, depending upon how you count. Firstly, I want to thank the planning board and the town council for all the hard work you've put into considering this ordinance. There've been, I think, Mike, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but at least 4 or 5 planning board meetings that have gone over every aspect, not only of the draft ordinances, but of the deed restrictions and all of the criteria such as, water flow, things of that nature. And I believe it's been before the town council 3, 4, maybe even 5 times, also to consider all of the specifics in the ordinance. So I think it's important for everybody in this room and in the town to know that this is not the first time that this has come before the council or the planning board. The question of what the gross income should be in terms of whether it's 130, 140% of area median income has been debated at every aspect by multiple times, both at the planning board and at least at the council meetings that I've attended. There's also been similar discussion about how much could be allocated for housing expenditures in terms of the affordability quotient, the lot sizes, every aspect of every section of the proposed ordinance has been dissected by the planning board and by the town council and by the town council's solicitor more than once, at least at meetings that I've attended, just by way of legislative history here. So the language that we have here has not just come up for the first time, and it's not come up without consideration. I think it's clearly up to the town council how you want to proceed, but I don't think that what you have before you is something that has certainly been debated and considered at every level by the planning board and the town council and of other groups around town. So I hope you will give it due consideration. And I thank you for your work.
So suppose we go forward with this. And we find out this thing goes haywire. We bring it back to the council to rescind this ordinance. Chance by some developers to sue us for doing that?
No. But any application for a land use project is always governed by the rules that are in force at the time the application is filed.
I understand that.
But you can rescind it anytime.
So if there's some problems that arise that we weren't anticipating, we say, oh, this isn't going to work now, and nobody has an application in, then we can bring this back to the council and say, okay, that didn't work out. We can either tweak it to resolve the issues, or else we can rescind the whole ordinance.
Correct, yes.
With a majority vote, obviously.
Correct, yes.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the proposed attainable housing ordinance to Little Compton Town Code, Chapter 18, contingent on edits and formatting.
Second.
The public hearing is hereby closed. The motion that is being entertained is that this proposal before us, with the edits that have been announced tonight being incorporated, would be placed into effect. And have I covered what you've said? Is there any council discussion on that?
Can we just clarify what the edits are? So
those edits would be set forth in the handout that you received from Mr. Anderson.
Okay.
Along with his other comments as to formatting and typographical errors.
Thank you.
And you have those written down?
I do, yes, and I've reviewed them.
Okay.
I really would like this to come back with the edits already in it. I don't have anything really against it. It's just that listen to this audience, and this
Right.
audience is on both sides of the issue.
Right. What this would do is come back, this would return with the edits in it. And it then would be, I think we could make that contingency, that we would vote a second time after seeing the edits. Or are we going to just pass it with the edits being prescribed?
Well, that's up to you, the council.
Want me to read it again?
No, but you have a choice. I think you can approve it subject to these edits, or what you can do is say it's approved, but contingent on further approval just to review the final document with the edited language in there.
Was that your motion?
No, you've added that to my motion.
That's correct. That's not your motion.
You added it.
That's one of your choices. Choice is the motion that's on the table. It's kind of 6 of one, and half a dozen of the other. It's the same thing.
I'm going to keep my motion. I'm happy to hear an amendment, though, if you want.
Why don't you make an amendment to it?
I'm going to keep my motion.
I will move that the motion on the table be amended to include the requirement that it return to the council at its next meeting for a vote that acknowledges proper entry of the edits that have been prescribed by the solicitor.
I'll second it.
And you'll second that amendment.
Yeah.
Are you ready to vote on the
You
amendment?
have to withdraw his.
Oh, he's
Just amended it.
We're amending.
This amendment.
The motion then is made and seconded to do what I just said. And that would be an amendment to the motion that was on the table. Vote the amendment. All in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Are there any opposed? Now to the main motion. The main motion with that edit incorporated is on the table for a vote. Are you ready to vote? All in favor of the motion to adopt this ordinance subject to the amendment we just passed, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say, I think I'm speaking on behalf of the council. This is an absolutely extraordinary and very well done action by the public. This is not seen in lots of cities and towns. There's lots of shouting, there's lots of back and forth. I am exceptionally grateful for the fact that to the way in which it was done, that some of you described, we have accomplished something that I think at least the five of us think on your behalf, and I believe you will not be disappointed that this is a way forward that will be carefully watched. And it will not be abused by someone who's intent on taking advantage. And I say that because the care that's gone into it by everyone that's worked on it. So thank you to the public and thank you to those who have helped make this happen. Thank you.
We're here with him like this and yeah, I know, and there's always room. You know, because Carol, right?
Meeting is hereby recessed for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. You can see a chance being higher.
I'll tell you, you have a second public hearing.
That's your buddy over there.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will return from the brief recess Our next action is to convene a public hearing. The public hearing is to consider amending the Little Compton Town Code, specifically Chapter 10 Personnel in the Section 10-17E holidays to to add the new holiday of June 19th, known as Juneteenth. We are to receive public comment on that issue as an element of approval of that ordinance change. Is there any public comment? Yes, sir.
Go for it. So just so people know, we just bargained with all three units, the police, the town employees and the fire department. And this was one of the bargaining chips that they wanted to, so we didn't have to go through arbitration. So that's why this is in here. So
Is there any public comment?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
So there being no public comment, we'll close the public hearing. Motion is made and seconded to approve the ordinance change that I described. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. The next item, by way of announcement, the repair of the north side of the commons on which perhaps you parked this evening will be, I'm hopeful that your car will move by Sunday, by the time they start, but that is the next focal point and is expected to start Sunday evening with the milling and et cetera. And a few days are expected in order to achieve the new panorama that we will look out from the town hall on shortly. Are there any other announcements?
I have a question. How will that affect, if at all, the town hall being open?
The town hall should be, as all of the houses on South of Commons, for example, were accessible the next morning. By the next morning, nominally 6 a.m. The normal access to the buildings will be available. What may be challenged is your favorite parking place, if you have one. You may need to park potentially as far away as baseball field or something like that. But I doubt that it will be. They're very efficient. They have been very efficient with what they're doing. Plus, they prefer working here to the other alternatives that they have in the work package right now. So we're sort of their favorite place to come to work. That is Lynch, getting very good cooperation. Yes, ma'am.
Are they going to pave John Dyer Road?
Now, John, the quick answer to your question is yes. Lynch has not been hired to do that because John Dyer Road is a town road and we, the town, are putting out an RFP, request for proposals, to repave John Dyer Road and Town Way and Taylor's Lane. That we expect to go out shortly after. Help me.
During the month of
August, during the month of August.
And
But yes, those are in our package for this year.
and including the engineering on the north and south side.
Right. Any other announcements? Next item is approval of the minutes. Counselor McHugh.
Yes, I'd like to pull the minutes, change the minutes. I made a motion. Samantha around is seconded. Everybody else is in favor. It says to delegate the agent, the attainable housing proposal to the Commons Foundation. The word role, I did not say, it's not in there. It's
where are we, Patrick?
right on second page. Towards the bottom. What it was supposed to say is delegate to the Commons Foundation the responsibility of identifying a monitoring agent for attainable housing proposal.
That clear? Delegate to the Commons Foundation a proposal for a monitoring agent for attainable housing.
Motion to approve the minutes with the amendment.
Second. Discussion on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks for the correction. The next item is old business, a request from Victoria Carter to use town landing on September 14th. Is Victoria here with us?
No.
There. Okay. The update that was received from Ms. Carter that the gathering would be for a small wedding with additional requests to have a small tent with tables and chairs. And then it added an additional request that it be allowed to change dates if necessary. It is the opinion, well, let me ask what your.
I don't think we can allow the tent and chairs. Plus we got a DEM restriction on that since I promised not to rent. We went and borrowed money from the state, which I thought we shouldn't have done, which put restrictions on the lot. But I don't even think we could grant it anyway.
I have similar concerns if Mr. Golembeski's correct.
We have granted in the past the authority to conduct a wedding at town landing. Is that within?
I'm happy to make a motion to allow a wedding on September 14th. Is it September 14th for 14 people? What's it say?
This is a wedding and a reception.
A small wedding.
And a reception.
And a reception.
In the past, you've only allowed the ceremony. Let's
Right.
clarify it that way. You have not allowed a reception and all of the other stuff.
I would ask that the motion be framed in the sense of granting to Victoria Carter authorization to use town landing for her wedding ceremony on September 14th.
I'll second.
Go ahead.
Is that going to be enough? You don't want to put in just the ceremony, no reception? Just so, because you may think, okay, ceremony, reception.
To specifically deny that. Fine.
For a small wedding only.
I will rescind my second.
And I'll rescind my motion.
I'll make the motion to allow Victoria Carter to have a small wedding ceremony without a reception.
Second.
Or tent, or chairs.
So to deny the remainder of the request.
Plates, forks, napkins.
Well, I mean, it leaves it open for interpretation.
Yep.
Kind of a ring. You bring the ring.
So, is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Actually, Andrew did already.
Oh, okay.
Andrew had already.
Okay.
Motion that has been made and seconded is that Victoria Carter be granted authority to use town landing for her wedding ceremony with no authority for a reception, tables and chairs, or tents. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item of business is to consider actions to authorize town administrator to review any applications or letters of interest submitted to fill the vacancy of the Director of Public Works as advertised. The deadline for that is tomorrow. So we are awaiting tomorrow. And then I would seek a motion to your pleasure as to what you would want the administrator to do with that information. Are you willing to have that returned, for example, at the next council meeting, his recommendation?
Yes. Let him review all applications and return to the council the next meeting with a recommendation.
Has there been any?
Applicants?
I
Yeah,
have two.
so he can interview him, but I'd like the full council to interview him also.
Okay.
Like we do with the police and the fire, so we can all make an informed decision on who we want as the maintenance director.
I agree.
So if we get more than, do we want to ask them to whittle them down to top 3 or 4 and then schedule interviews at the council?
Probably the top 3 will work.
How many do we have so far?
2.
You have two.
But just in the
I
event.
think you're gonna get two.
Yeah, the deadline's tomorrow anyway.
Holding out hope.
So I'll amend my motion for an interview before the next council meeting, before we make it with the
We
recommendation.
already have the Ag Trust coming at 6 o'clock
Right.
on your next council meeting. You can do it earlier than that. Just
5 p.m.
Mention that.
Is anybody available next week? Because I think it's important that we get a director in there.
Available.
Yes,
How about next Thursday at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock?
let's not decide it here.
Okay,
Perhaps the motion would, let me move the following.
It's in my motion.
Thank you. That the town administrator review the applicants for Director of Public Works and schedule a council meeting in which we can approve that next week. That is mutually agreeable to all councilors.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Thank you. The next of our new old business items is to review and consider the next steps for approval of an on-site wastewater management plan. And we have with us Mr. Jim Reardon, who is going to brief us on that. This is by way of reminder, it enables us to qualify for having an on-site wastewater management plan, enables us to qualify our citizens for financial assistance in wastewater management correction. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mushin. I have a presentation.
Do.
It's
Gotta get it to
I'll
open.
just introduce a little bit to sort of add to what Mr. Mushin was just saying. So the purpose of this plan is to provide eligibility for the town for a line of credit. And that line of credit is then available to homeowners in town, property owners in town, specifically residential property owners, to update their septic systems, whether they might be failed, substandard, or otherwise in need of repair. So a lot of this is really focused on cesspools. The intent of upgrading cesspools so they're no longer causing a problem to the environment or the public health. And I'll take you through the presentation.
I don't know why it's like this. Do you know?
Yeah, so the screen splits. There's the actual slideshow, I guess it's called. And then for whatever reason, it seems to, is it showing us the slideshow on your laptop?
Yeah. We just do this.
So you got to flip the screens. Yeah, there you go. That's another way to do it. And then I think if you hit, slideshow from the beginning on the left. See how it does. It did the same.
Sorry, we'll get a preview of each slide before we get to.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is fine with me. All right. So my name's Jim Reardon. I'm from West End and Sampson, and we've had the pleasure of working with the town, in particular, several members of the town in putting this plan together. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, this is for the Little Compton on-site wastewater management. Next slide, please. So what is an on-site wastewater management plan? So here are the specific elements. Description of the management area. We'll talk a little bit about each of these in later slides. Just wanted to introduce you to the concepts first. Description of the community assistance program for an on-site wastewater management, for on-site wastewater systems, treatment systems. C, the method to ensure or encourage regular OWTS maintenance in the management area. Next, financial analysis. So this is an analysis of how many systems are likely to need repair and upgrade, how much that would likely cost, and so therefore how much need there is for these loans. A designated community official to help manage and administer the program. And the description of the method for disposal of septic that comes out of the new septic tank. So if you update all these systems, and you're maintaining them on a regular basis, which hopefully folks are, what do you do with all the waste? Where does it go? Next. All right, so this is that first criterion that I mentioned, which is a description of the management area. And in your case, like most towns, it's town-wide. Towns that restrict this somewhat generally do so because they have part of the town being sewered and part of the town on septic systems. And of course, the sewered areas, you know, they have sewers. Most towns, and DEM follows suit with this too, want to see folks who are in this area, in a sewered area, tie into the sewer as opposed to upgrade their systems. Because it's expensive to upgrade the systems, and, you know, there's potential pollution issues that go along with that and the potential for the system to fail. But having a tie into a sewer alleviates those problems. Next slide, please. All right, so this slide shows, again, more description of the management area, but what it's really focusing on is which systems might need to be repaired and upgraded. So the ones that are green dots are existing septic systems, and the ones that are red dots are systems that have been upgraded since the inception of the septic system regulations in the state. And what that likely means, these red systems, what that likely means is that these were cesspools and were upgraded. That's considered a repair by DEM. And so you get an idea of the relative need in town. So we think that about 8 systems were upgraded per year since 1989. We took a look at DEM septic system records, the permitting records, and we were able to figure out roughly, you know, how many there were. The records aren't perfect, but they're pretty good. And that represents about 8 repairs per year. That's of all those red dots. And if we take 8 systems per year, multiply it out by a typical cost of a system, which these days is about $14,000, $15,000. In the first year, if you had 8 repairs, it would be roughly $131,000, $132,000. In the next year, it would be $134,000, and that's because of you know, inflation. We used a 2% inflation, 2.5% inflation to come up with that. If you add those two numbers together, the 131, 132, and the 133, 134, you get 266. So this table shows an accumulation of total cost year by year over the course of time, assuming 8 systems per year, so that over 10 years, there's total cost of about 1.4 million. So that's the total need over 10 years. Next slide, please. So description of the community assistance program, we can just kind of tick through these. Great, okay. So CISLIP, that's the Community Septic System Loan Program. That's a state program that this plan helps you become eligible for. Provides 2% loans for 10-year terms up to $30,000. So the idea is to cover the total cost of a system repair. Available for engineering, design, permitting, and system installation. So not just the construction of the system, but also planning it, engineering it, and getting it permitted. It includes substandard and failed systems. So a failed system could be a hydrologic failure, which means the system backs up. It could also be a treatment failure. So if somebody was doing water quality monitoring or groundwater monitoring and discovered that there was a high level of septic system pollutants or something like that, and tracked that back to a system, that would count as a failed system. That very, very rarely happens, but it is possible. So that's what that is. And so those are the 2 kinds of failure. And then substandard generally means cesspools, but it can mean other kinds of systems too. So back in the early days of the septic system regulations, there were permits that were given for systems with metal tanks. A lot of those metal tanks are pretty much rotting out right now. They had about a 10-year life expectancy to them.
They were built probably in the early 70s, if there's some of those that still exist. And so upgrading those sorts of things to current standard is also allowed under this. Advertising via web and fact sheets, so some public outreach to make all this happen. And Rhode Island Housing administers this program on behalf of communities. So you don't have to worry about like all the loans that go out and everything. You just contract with Rhode Island Housing. They take a flat rate percentage associated with the loan. Forget exactly what it is, but it's pretty nominal. It's like 1% or 2%, something like that. That gets tagged on to the homeowner's cost. And it's actually incorporated in that 2% interest rate. So the homeowner just pays the price of the system plus a flat 2%. And they can upgrade their system with that. Next slide, please. Method to ensure and encourage regular on-site wastewater treatment system maintenance in the management area. So you can make this more extensive as a community if you want, but working with your community representatives in putting this together, we took a fairly minimalist approach at this point, not to make this too burdensome to folks in town. So it's just education and outreach. So we're going to advertise this program on the town website, make automated calls and radio announcements about the availability of the system. Public meetings like this one to let folks know that the program's available. Fact sheets and advertising. I think the fact sheets were going to maybe get mailed out with tax bills, if I remember correctly. And then a method for tracking inspection and maintenance will be considered. So there have been a couple of grants that have come around that the town has been eligible for. Idea was maybe to try and go after some of those grants to see if a tracking program could be put in place to help make sure that people actually maintain their systems. So that this public money that's being spent on these loans goes to good use and goes to a use that's maintained over the course of time. In other words, people aren't just sort of left with their septic systems without any support in making sure that they're getting maintained. Next slide, please. Designated community official, and if you could just click one more time. And that's going to be Tony Texera, town administrator, will be responsible for the program. Again, the responsibility for this program is pretty minimal. Let's get the education and outreach, move that forward, and to make sure that reporting with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank and Rhode Island Housing are responsible for the loan program overall, that's taken care of. Let's see, designation of a method for disposal of the septic generated by the maintenance activities. So if you click again, so currently most private septic system haulers bring septic to Fall River. You guys probably all know that because I'm sure you have septic systems and you have to contract to get this done. So that'll continue to happen. Fall River has plenty of capacity to do that. And so that's the intent going forward. And then typical costs to communities for this program. So of course, it's dependent on the level of programming that you do, but the way that you folks have structured this in your on-site wastewater management plan, CSLIP program, again, Community Septic System Loan Program, is just a pretty nominal cost. Administration is largely borne by the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank and Rhode Island Housing. So it's structured into the cost of the loan. It's probably about $5,000 to obtain a loan if you're looking for like consulting assistance with something like that. You could do it yourselves internally. It's not a big deal to do. And you can do that with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank with your existing staff. About 3,000 to 6,000 annually. Again, if you sort of farm out the reporting that's necessary, if you just do it in-house, that cost would disappear. 8,000 to 25,000 over the course of about 5 years for various forms of outreach. And those were the things that I mentioned earlier, the fact sheet, the website, et cetera. Next slide. And so that's basically in a nutshell. And so what we're looking for this evening is for approval by the town council to formally submit this to DEM. It's been submitted in draft form to DEM already. They gave us their review and comments on it. And we incorporated those comments. They weren't terribly significant. There were a few typos and things like that they helped us out with. So other than that, we think this is ready to go forward, and we put it back to the town council.
Thank you very much, Jim. Any discussion on that?
I just want to thank everyone involved in getting this done over the last year and a half. I really appreciate it. I think this can really help people in need that need to replace their septic tanks, especially with interest rates being so high. I think this will make a really positive impact on the community.
It's a great job. When will this get live for us here after, if it all goes through?
Yeah, so I think it typically takes maybe 2 to 4 months to negotiate the loan with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank.
You gotta go through DEM first, right?
Yeah, DEM will.
Where we are today, this program starts.
Yeah, so we'd send it to DEM. That could, if you approved it, that could basically happen tomorrow. DEM's review on it, I don't think will take very long at all. I haven't talked to the folks over there who do that, but the same ones who already gave us comments. And the comments were very minimal. There were, I don't know, half a dozen comments in there. They'd be able to review that, I would think, within a couple of weeks at most. And
Motion to approve the on-site wastewater management plan.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay.
Then
I'll second it anyway.
when
Okay, well then we.
would it be live for us?
So then you need to negotiate the loan program with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I was saying might take a couple of months.
So we're real close here with this. So there's been a lot of work being done. It's taken a year and a half. That's great. Thanks. And we're gonna use ARPA money for this, if I'm not mistaken, right? To fund this, what are we using?
This particular program comes from the Rhode Island Infrastructure.
Yeah, from the state.
Oh, sorry.
You have to negotiate with them, we sit down and say, okay, here it is. And then we'll add housing, it's actually.
No, the fees they were talking about to the municipalities that we have to pay. That's what I was talking about. Wasn't there fees? No, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, this is all being done with Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank money, like Tony mentioned. The money originally came through the Clean Water Act, SRF program, State Revolving Fund program. Monies over the years that have been loaned out through that have been recycled and are now considered state monies. And so Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank loans monies out for this and other purposes, but this is one of the main purposes they loan it out for. All the federal restrictions on it and stuff have gone away.
Just a question, if the housing trust buys a property with a house on it and they're gonna rehab it and it's got a failed septic system, can they apply for this?
They're a public entity as opposed to a private entity. They would probably go through a different approach than this. We could talk to the infrastructure bank.
Actually, I think based on their structure, they would be eligible.
You think so?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. Nonprofit, a non-business.
Not 2%.
Yeah. Yes, Don. Sure.
Yeah, Don Maderas, Able Engineering, Little Compton. I'm a licensed septic designer. We design systems in compliance with DEM. This sounds like a good program. I think there's one aspect that it doesn't address, and it's an important one. And it speaks to the purpose of the program itself, the fundamental goals. The monitoring, correct me if I'm wrong, the monitoring and the maintenance in this program is geared around people who voluntarily want to upgrade their septic systems. What it doesn't speak to and should is people that should be upgrading their septic systems and for whatever reason don't. And we tend to think we can rely on DEM to police that aspect, but in my experience, Tiverton, Little Compton, as we know, when a property is up for sale, if it has a cesspool or a non-compliant system, there's usually an inspection. There's usually a provision for that system to be upgraded. If there is no financing, there's no police action to make sure that that actually gets done. The house sells, the new owner moves on. Now, if there's financing, usually the financing lender process ensures that's done. A big aspect is renovations. A lot of times when you want to renovate your house, it triggers septic, an evaluation of the existing septic system. Will it support the renovation of either adding a bedroom, which increases the flow, or if the renovation is of a certain size, even if it's not adding a bedroom and increasing the flow, the size, the square footage size of the renovation triggers the DEM process to evaluate and upgrade the system. So I can tell you as an engineer, we designed and get approved a lot of septic systems for these two cases. And we drive around and we see the renovations get done. We see the homes get sold and we see that the septic systems never get put in. The town of Portsmouth has a wastewater management program where they actually have monitoring and inspections of not just people that want to upgrade, of all the systems in the town. Now, obviously, that requires a full-time person in Portsmouth dedicated to that aspect. But I just wanted to point that out because sometimes we rely on DEM, and you would think DEM on their website, when you submit an application, they track it. Soil testing, soil evaluation approval, design submitted, design approval. Design is good for 5 years, so the design expires. You would think they would, at the 5-year period, look to see if the design was ever installed, but they don't. Why? I don't know. I've talked to informally with DEM people, and I've never really gotten an answer other than the department has no way to police that. So it's fallen onto the town. So Portsmouth is doing it. Tiverton's trying to do it, and they're doing it to a degree with their management district. So that's all. Just the inspection and monitoring sounds good, but that's only for the people that want to upgrade their systems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was motion and seconded.
No, you did, but I don't think they heard it.
Right.
I heard it.
Would you repeat your motion?
So I made a motion to allow this to be given to RIDEM for approval.
I seconded it.
Okay. The motion's been made and seconded to submit the package to DEM for approval. Yes, your choice. I think we're in good shape here.
Oh, yeah. I'm Moderator Wall, I'm Chair of the Conservation Commission, and just wanted to let you know that we have been kept apprised of Jim and colleagues' work. Myself, it was a commission not before me, and the final product is really excellent. It's actually a good read, believe it or not.
Thank you.
And also in terms of the issues that Don just raised and the issue of tracking and maintenance and enforcement, I anticipate that will be the subject of discussion at the Conservation Commission, and we may bring you recommendations in the future.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? Are you ready to vote on the motion? Oh, yes.
If I may, just very quickly, just give credit to Mike Steers and Don McNaughton. They were very instrumental in moving this along. So they very much appreciated their efforts.
Too.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
By saying aye. Aye. Are any opposed? Yeah. in the interest of two people who have, or two issues that have waited that are still here, I wonder if we might have a motion to move.
I'll move new business two up and communications up.
And communications one. Second. Made in second.
How about the chief?
I don't
New
believe.
business,
Yeah.
3,
I'll make the motion.
communication 1.
3 of new business and communications one up.
The motion is made and seconded to receive public comment from Mr. Gary Nitkin to request the fire chief, to approve a request from the fire chief for the use of opioid and ambulance reimbursement funds and to approve a letter from the Congregational Church. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And thank you to the Ag Trust for patience. Oh, man. Mr. Nitkin.
Gary Nitkin, 40-year resident and retired band teacher at Wilbur McMahon Schools. Thank you for allowing me to vent my concerns. It is my contention that the South Shore Beach is greatly overbooked. I visited on a number of occasions, seen rows and rows of cars, 4 abreast, cars completely around the perimeter, and most of the license plates appear to be out of state. And I don't think this is a great condition under any circumstances. I feel, first of all, I feel that Little Compton residents are being displaced out of staters. I think it's our right as town residents to access our beach in an enjoyable manner. Now, I realize this is a money-making proposition. I don't want to kill the golden goose. I don't even want to give it a haircut. I'm just suggesting that perhaps there's a way we can reduce the number of cars and still maintain the same cash flow. I'm thinking perhaps a possibility might be raise the price of beach access on holidays, weekends for out-of-staters. Another might be perhaps a guarantee of Little Compton access and maybe perhaps have a quota for out-of-state folks. Now, looking at this thing, there's a number of different levels about it. Let's take the ecological level, all right? We, as Little Compton folks, are very concerned about our town, about the beauty of the nature, about the estuaries, the endangered species, the natural state of things. Somehow it appears to me that seeing 300+ cars parked abreast, 4 in a row and around the perimeters, idling and dripping cars, and cars do drip, cannot be great for the environment. And is this something we really want to be having in this town? It seems to me that again, balancing the commercial value of the property against the right of people to use it in a normal fashion, there's got to be a balance that could be struck there. I see, all right, we're selling hot dogs there. I see a new coffee truck there. I'm not sure where this is going. I mean, do we really need this? We have a beautiful natural beach, rocky shores. And again, I've approached the beach commission with this. And I was told, well, this is business as usual. This is how we do it. Well, not really, because let's take a look at the beach. The beach is a lot smaller. I mean, there's no denying that it shrunk. I mean, the erosion, the sand, whatever happened. And yet we're still packing them in there. And then, and then we're commercializing it. Maybe we can get up to the point of having a boardwalk with pinball machines. I don't know. I mean, that's a stretch, of course. I'm being ridiculous, but I think it's really fouling up our natural environment and our access to our beach. There's a lot of ways we could commercialize. I mean, sure, you could make money. You could put a McDonald's down there. Bringing people like crazy, make a lot of money. But is that what we want for our town? I think we have a right to have a decent standard of living, a decent amount to allowable to enjoy, have an enjoyable experience at the beach. That's what I'm saying. And that is my contention, and I really believe that this needs some looking after. And perhaps we could kick the idea around. And I'm not alone on this. I've spoken to my neighbors that have packed a lunch, going there and just forget it, went home. You know, it's, so again, thank you for allowing me to speak my piece. And I hope this leads to something.
Thank you, Mr. Nitkin.
Thank you.
Mr. Nitkin and I exchanged phone calls, and I advised him of the fact that it is the Beach Commission's elected responsibility to make such decisions. He wanted and has done effectively what he sought to do, I think, which is to bring this thing to the public forum and in a recorded session. So it remains my advice to you that it is in fact the Beach Commission that makes that decision. We don't tell them or attempt to influence them as another elected body to another elected body that they should do this or that. But I believe your objective has been achieved by this public conversation. Thank you. The next item of business is a request from the fire chief to use opioid funds and ambulance reimbursement funds. Opioid would be this year and ambulance reimbursement would be the next 2 years for a 3-year payments, a series of 3 payments over those years for a new cardiac monitor for the frontline rescue for use by the fire department.
Motion to approve.
Second. I spoke to the chief about this, and it's a cardiac monitor defibrillator. It's basically, they're replacing one that's 8 or 9 years old with a new modern one, so I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Next is a letter from the United Congregational Church requesting to use town landing on Sunday, August 25th.
Motion to approve.
With all the stipulations and.
Adhere to.
The motion is made and seconded to approve the request subject to compliance with all necessary regulations and stipulations for
Adhere to.
being adhered to. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. Finally, to the Agricultural Conservancy Trust, we are ready to receive a land use planning.
I've been very patient.
What about us?
Oh, you've been. Is that as large as we get?
Yeah,
Courage, with some help.
I would love help.
You can make that a slideshow.
It's only a PDF though.
Yeah, you can make PDFs a slideshow. Just have to go.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Will this work? Yes, it will. Okay.
Well, the council may remember that we are, Don McNaughton, Chair of the Ag Trust. The council may remember that we are coming to you at your next meeting to discuss the findings of our year-long studies that the Ag Trust has managed on behalf of a number of town organizations. In the process of carrying out those studies, we've learned a lot. And I thought it would be helpful if we shared some of that tonight so that when we come to you on August 8th, there's a better sense of common understanding in the room before we present the full findings. And while I'm here, I'm also going to take the opportunity to not only give you some of that data, but also to discuss a question that was raised at last town council meeting when I stood before you. And that being, the question being percent of land, agricultural land that the Ag Trust has conserved, what percent is still in agriculture? And I will answer that at the end of this presentation. So, slide please. Thank you. We are carrying out 2 complementary studies, the purpose of which is to provide data
to support the town's comprehensive planning process and to support community conversations and decisions around Little Compton's future. The analysis and findings of both of these studies are not specific to the Ag Trust. In fact, they were co-sponsored by the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, the Nature Conservancy, a variety of individuals in town, and 50% underwritten by the Van Buren Foundation of Newport. So to start in building what we're going to call a primer on Little Compton, I start with a map of Little Compton. And this will help to build some common understanding of what we find here in Little Compton. This first slide is a map of Little Compton overlain with its wetlands, ponds, and rivers. So this land is wet, permanently wet, seasonally wet, but it is wet. And it comprises about 30% of the total town acreage. And you'll see that the wetlands follow the ridges and valleys, north and south, as you move across town east to west. Slide, please. Put on top of the map now is what I'm calling the built environment. And these are impervious surfaces, roads, houses, other buildings. So you can see where the built environment of Little Compton rests in between and around the wetlands. Slide, please. This next slide then layers on top of all that the acreage that is protected in town, conservation land, if you will, that is permanently protected. And these lands have been protected over the past 40 years by a variety of organizations, not only the Ag Trust, but you can see that in green. Now, the next slide reduces the wetlands, the impervious surfaces, and actually the wetlands and the protected lands, and it scales them back to gray to show you, in essence, what's left. And this is land in white is what's left. It's not wet and it's not conserved. And this is the land about which Little Compton needs to have a discussion as we move forward as a community. What shall be the future use of this land? So I am now going to layer on a couple more slides that deal with what was previously white. I'm now going to change to different colors. So the orange is now the agricultural land that is unprotected. More than half of the agricultural land in town does not have any protection whatsoever. State of Rhode Island has declared agricultural land as a significant move afoot to make sure that it stays agricultural intent. And I would add that the agricultural character of Little Compton is largely dependent upon the maintenance of this land in agriculture. Next slide. I now have layered on the unprotected forest across town. You'll see that the ag land largely resides east in the west side of town, and the unprotected forest largely on the the east side of town. One more. I've now layered on developable residential lots in yellow. So this now shows you where there are lots in town that are not protected, that are not wet, that could be developed. And I will talk about these a little bit further later, but I just wanted to show you where they are. And so what's left, go back. So what's left then in the white is the current built environment. These are the current lots that are developed. And of course, there may be opportunity to further develop the lots that are already developed by increasing density on those lots. But in essence, this is the universe of the land that is in essence in play for Little Compton's future. And part of it is in ag, part of it is in forest cover, which is important for water cleanliness, drinking water, and so forth. And then part of this is undeveloped residential lots. And the other part of it is developed residential lots that could be developed further in certain instances. And so this is the whole universe of what we have to talk about as we move forward in Little Compton. I'll just add one more slide. This shows your storm event by the year 2080. Obviously, we would hope that people are careful about developing further in these areas. I know it's going to happen, but that of course would be a concern going forward. So that gives you a quick idea of land use in Little Compton. What was wet, what is protected, what is unprotected in ag, unprotected in forest, what is the current built environment, what are the undeveloped residential lots that exist. One more slide, please. So let me now turn to general housing. Development is continuing in Little Compton. Looking at only new homes on vacant lots, meaning not homes that are torn down and rebuilt. There have been 54 new homes developed since 2018. That's over 6 years. So on average, about 9 new homes a year. And so over the last 35 years, there have been 554 units added to Compton. 500 houses added since 1990. Slide. In Little Compton today, there are 2,414 total housing units. About half of those are owner occupied. About 8% are renter occupied. And about a third of them are occupied for seasonal use only. And that includes about 5% for short-term rentals. So the upper right-hand pie there shows that about 67% of households in Little Compton are lived in year-round, and about a third are lived in seasonally. Can we go back one second? And I wanted to mention that, no surprise to anyone here, that housing prices have increased significantly with a median house price today of $950,000. This is actually 2023 data, but a median house price of $950,000. Let me show you how that compares in a number of ways with comparison communities. And the comparison communities that I showing you here today are Charlestown, Jamestown, Middletown, New Shoreham or Block Island, and Tiverton. First, the chart on the left, this shows the compound annual growth rate of median home sale prices in those communities, first from 2013 to 2019, and then from 2019 to 2023. And you'll see that in those communities, the compounded annual growth rate of pricing for houses between 2013 and 19 didn't really grow all that much, around the rate of inflation. Charlestown is sort of the outlier, as well as Tiverton. But from 2019 to 2023, Block Island, Middletown, Jamestown, and Little Compton all saw compounded annual growth rates around 15%. So we are not alone in this housing situation. And in fact, in the state of Rhode Island, the whole state shows similar kinds of data. The chart on the right shows basically the compounded annual growth rates as you go across the years. And you'll see that Little Compton is sort of in the middle there. Next. Sticking with comparison communities for a quick second, I also just wanted to show you where Little Compton's conserved land area is in relation to the other comparison communities. 28% of Little Compton is conserved. That sort of puts us in the middle of the pack. We are by no means an outlier. Tiverton is at the bottom of these communities at 21%, not that far from Little Compton's 28%. And New Shoreham or Block Island is at the top of the heap with conservation lands comprising about 43% of their total acreage. Let me talk a little bit more about housing today in Little Compton, because we thought that this was particularly interesting. 57% of homes in Little Compton today are on lots that are less than 2 acres. A large part of that is because when the 2-acre zoning came into being in 1968, there were a whole number of lots that either already were developed or were grandfathered going forward. So when you add the 57% of less than 2 acres and the 11% of 2 acres, about 2/3 of the housing in Little Compton is on 2 acres or less, leaving about 1/3 on 2 acres or more. There are 235 vacant developable residential lots. And of those 235 developable residential lots, about 56%, almost the same percentage, are less than 2 acres. There's another 9% which are 2 acres. So again, about 2/3 of the developable residential lots are 2 acres or less. And there's 1/3 that are more than 2 acres and some up to and over 10 acres. This slide shows fiscal impact of various types of residences in Little Compton. Basically, when you talk about the impact on the town's budget that various types of housing has in Little Compton, this shows the contribution of various types of housing to that to the town budget. So I'm going to start at the bottom. For those residential properties, 2 acres or less, it actually costs the town $2,000 to service that residence, largely because there is people in school, and therefore it's either school related, public safety related, town government related. But in general, for every house on 2 acres or less, it costs the town about $2,000. Contrast that with the top of the chart where we show seasonal residential. And because seasonal residential don't have kids in school, are only occupied during parts of the year, those seasonal residential lots actually contribute positively to the town budget, to the tune of almost $5,000. And the others are somewhere in between, as you'll see. But the point here is that, and trust me, I am not suggesting that we want more seasonal housing, but that seasonal housing has a huge, significant positive impact on the town budget. So as we go forward, we just need to keep in mind that the more homes that are built, there will be varying degrees of either positive or negative impact on the town. So that was a quick, and I wanted to be brief because I know you guys have been here for quite a while. But that's a fairly brief discussion of some of the data that our 2 studies have already turned up, and data that we found was quite compelling and will be added to the conversation around town. Slide, please. Okay, now let me just turn quickly to the Ag Trust itself And I want to answer the question that was raised last meeting as to how much of the ag land that the Ag Trust has conserved, how much is still in agriculture. So let me just start. Slide, Carol, thank you. Why conserve land in Little Compton? First and foremost, for the Ag Trust is to maintain agriculture as an economic force in this town. Working farmland and rural character are integral to our way of life. And you can see some other reasons why it's important to conserve land in Little Compton. And, obviously the Ag Trust, as well as a variety of partners, have helped in that regard. Slide. Let me describe the farmland in Little Compton. Agricultural land accounts for 16%, or just over 2,000 acres, of land cover in Little Compton today. So there are only 2,300 acres of ag in town out of a total of about 14,000 acres. 1,000 of those acres, about 43%, is permanently protected. The remaining 1,300 acres, the majority of the ag land, is not protected at this point. And when you talk about the impact of ag on the town's character, what makes Little Compton, I would submit that the presence of agriculture is a rather significant contributor to that. Now, the Ag Trust has been instrumental in protecting about 3/4 of the farmland that is currently conserved. So of the roughly 1,000 acres of Little Compton farmland, the Ag Trust has protected 770 acres, and other conservation organizations have about 238 acres. Now, to conserve that 770 acres of ag land, the Ag Trust has permanently protected 69 agricultural properties totaling 1,400 acres. Now, you may say, wait, you have to protect 1,400 acres to get 770 acres of ag protected? Yes. And I'll show you the visual here on this page. Here's why. This is the Jackson property in East Main Road. This is in conservation. Obviously, you can see what's under cultivation and you can see what's wet. Many, in fact, basically every agricultural property in town has some version of wetlands on it or forest cover, typically where it is too wet to farm. And so this is why, in order to save agricultural land, you often get wetlands and forest cover along with it. So to protect the 770 acres, we actually conserved 1,400 acres. Now that 1,400 acres is about 63% of the trust total holdings. So 2/3 of our activity over the 40 years has been to save agricultural land. And yes, along with it comes wetlands and forests. That's just how the lot lines are drawn. That's how the proprietors first laid out Little Compton. It is a consequence of history in many ways. Now, 80% of these properties are under easement, while 20% are held in fee. So that's 52 easement properties and 17 held in fee. So what the hell does that mean? So let me again tell you what an easement versus a fee property is all about. Slide, please. The Ag Trust holds conserved land in 2 ways. First is the Ag Trust owns the fee. We actually own the land and we lease it out to farmers. And we own it in perpetuity, and it's our responsibility to protect it from change or damage. The second way the Ag Trust holds land is to own the deed to development rights, or more commonly known now as conservation easements. The landowner continues to own and use and may sell that land, but the restrictions on development are upheld by the Ag Trust in perpetuity. And I want to, next slide, please. I want to focus on the deed to development rights because the primary reason the primary purpose for the Ag Trust being created was to acquire development rights to the agricultural property in town. And this is directly from the enabling legislation from 1985. So in essence, the Ag Trust was designed to hold conservation easements, also known as deed to development rights, the purpose of which was to keep farmers on their land and in their houses. In that way, it allowed the farmers to extract value by selling a conservation easement. Ag Trust gives them some money. they sell us a conservation easement, they stay on their land, they continue to farm it, and they stay in their house. In addition, in the process of buying development rights or conservation easements, the farmer often carves out other house lots that can be used by future generations. So in a way, the Ag Trust is the original farmers housing program. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. Slide, please. So now let me talk about easements versus fee. The trust holds easements over 52 agricultural properties totaling about 1,100 acres. All but 2 of those 52 agricultural properties are still actively being farmed. 50 out of 52. Slide, please. Now, moving on to the fee properties. The trust owns outright 17 agricultural properties totaling 277 acres in fee. All 17 properties are currently being farmed. 13 of the 17 are under lease with 7 different local farmers. One of the fee purchases allowed the granting family to continue to farm it, and the other 3 are paid annually. So thank you for letting me offer those comments about the ag land. And as far as the studies that are underway, actually near completion, we'll come back on August 8th, sort of lead you through the complete findings of those studies to generate more conversation. And answer any questions?
Very comprehensive.
Very good.
Yeah, it's a good report.
Thank you.
Yes, Andy.
Go back to the slide where he shows the cost or the allocation of money.
Yeah.
I would love to see their loading parameters for this model, because that's really a ludicrous calculation. Right? It's absolutely ludicrous. I think it's dangerous to put numbers up here like this. People are going to see plus and minus and make assumptions that people actually understand that they actually did this right. And there's no way that's done right. Because the cost, the positive impact is based on the home value, right? And the cost of running a school is based on fixed and operational costs that expand based on school numbers. So if you live in a 1/4 acre lot and you have a school kid, or you live in a 2 acre lot and you have a school kid, the cost of those kids is the same. And if you live in a house without kids, the cost is the same. And so for you to parse it out this way is really dangerous, because what that's going to do is somehow make it seem like, you know, that somehow, you know, it's just.
Okay, so
assumptions.
Okay, so let me stop you. Let me stop you, because I would welcome your comments after you actually read the report. So
I can tell you right now that.
Okay, wait. Okay,
I would
let's.
love to see those parameters. I'd love to see those loading parameters in that model.
Fantastic. I'll be happy to share them with you. All you had to do was ask.
Direct your comments to the council, please. Don't start an argument.
Thank you.
Separately, please.
Ed.
Yes.
Can I just ask Don a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Would it be possible for the Ag Trust to put the report on the Ag Trust website?
Yeah, so it's still in draft form. When we come to the town council, we're also in the process of, in addition to talking to the town council on August 8th, we're going to talk to the Conservation Commission on July 31st, the Planning Board on August 6th. The Housing Trust, we're trying to find a date. We find, as particularly getting feedback from some of the stakeholders that were responsible for the program. So once we've gone through all that, we'd be happy to put that up on the website.
Is the draft copy of the report available in the meantime?
I don't see why not. Yeah. So.
Thank you very much. And as a reward for your patience, we have agreed to convene next meeting of the council an hour early at 6, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hear your second meeting.
Thank you so much.
There being just a few more pieces of business. The consent calendar.
Motion to place consent calendar on file, and that's unless anybody wants to pull up for conversation.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you. And the payment of bills.
Pay the bills.
Second. Paying the bills. All in favor?
Aye.
There being no further matters before us, we'll close this meeting, adjourn the meeting, and thank you very much for your